How's everyone doing out there? First off, shame on all of you. None of you told me that I needed a haircut, so thanks a lot for that. Second of all, we are going to be working on something called completing the square. Oh, sorry, my dog's getting a drink of water. It's a little rude, Maya. Okay, that's enough, Maya. All right, we're going to be working on something called completing the square. And some of you may have learned this at some point in time. Some of you might not have. Some teachers teach it, some don't. It's just another way that you can solve quadratic equations. And today what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give you a visual understanding of what it means to complete the square before you get to class, hopefully, on Tuesday. So here's completing the square. We're going to be starting with x squared plus something x. And then what we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding a number in there to make it what's called a perfect square. And so the goal is to figure out what is this magic number going to be in order to make it a perfect square. So let's first understand what x squared plus 8x really means. So I'm going to just draw a little square here. And that's just x squared. It's a square with side length x. And if you take x times x, it is x squared. Then what we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding to that 8x. So I'm going to take the same dimensions. So that's still an x. But we're going to go all the way down and try my best to make it to scale, but it's not. That's a length of 8. So we now have 8x. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this 8x and I'm going to split it apart in two. So let's take this and we're just going to cut it in half. And if I cut that in half, and then this top part here is 4, and the bottom part here is 4. Now this is where the magic happens. I'm going to take this section here and attach it there. And I'm going to take this section here and I'm going to attach it there. I'm going to rotate it around. So this top part is going to be rotated sideways, and then it's just going to attach onto that little box of x. So what we have is, there's our x squared. And then we took one of the pieces over here, and that's a 4. And then we have another piece over here that was a length of 4. So we still have 8x, we just split it in half and made two sections. What we're doing now in order to complete the square is we are literally completing the square. We're making this a perfect square right here. And I want to know, what does this area have to be? Hopefully some of you are shouting at the screen right now. If this is a length of 4 and this is a length of 4, then this area has to be 16. So by adding a 16, it makes it a perfect square. So I'm going to go up here, and this is a 16. And the reason it's called a perfect square is, if you factor this, the things that multiply to 16 would be 4 and 4, and that would add up to make an 8. So this ends up becoming x plus 4 times x plus 4, which is called a perfect square, and we can write it as x plus 4 squared. And if we go back to this image here, we can see why it's called x plus 4 squared. This length going across the top is x plus 4, and the one going down the side is x plus 4. So we've literally created a square that is x plus 4 by x plus 4. And to do that, we had to add in 16. So that 16 was the number that made it a perfect square. Let's go ahead and look at one more. We have x squared plus 5x. So start with our x squared. We're going to add a 5x over here. So this is x, this is 5. So in order to make it fit like a square like we did before, we're going to cut that in half. So let's cut that in half. And then each one of these tops and bottoms are now worth 2.5. And we're going to take the 2.5 and put it here and put it here. So now let's redraw it. We have our x squared, and to that we attached 2.5 going this way and a length of 2.5 going this way. So this is your x squared, this is 2.5x, this is 2.5x, that's why we have 5x up there. And now we have to figure out what goes in here in order to make it a perfect square. So if this has a length of 2.5 and this has a length of 2.5, then this total area is just 2.5 times 2.5, which is 6.25. And that value would make this a perfect square, 6.25. And if you were to factor it, the things that multiply to a 6.25 are just 2.5 and 2.5. So we can now rewrite this as x plus 2.5 squared. It's been written as a perfect square. And you can see it again in the diagram. We made a perfect square with x plus 2.5 on one side and x plus 2.5 on the other side. So when we're talking about completing the square, hopefully this visual shows you we are literally just finding a number here that would make this a perfect square. Let's do a couple more, this time without having to draw it out. So if we had that 16x, pretend we had that long bar here and it was x and 16 for a length here. If we end up cutting it in half, it would have been 8 and 8. And then we'd end up squaring that 8, which gives us a 64. So the number here to complete the square would be 64. The easiest way to come up with that is you take this middle number, divide it by 2, you get 8, and then square it, you get 64. So middle number divide by 2, and then square it to get that last number. And even if there's a minus sign in here, that's going to be fine. Take that middle number, which is a minus 10, divide it by 2, we're going to get a 5, and then square it, and we get 25. Let's go back up to this top one. I want to rewrite it after the whole purpose of doing this is so we can rewrite it as a perfect square. So this one would be rewritten as x plus 8 squared. And if we go to the second one, the two things that multiply to 25 and make a minus 10 would be minus 5 and minus 5. So that would become x minus 5 squared. If we have x squared plus 20x, the number that we need to complete the square is, yeah, you got it, it's 100. All we're doing is taking 20, divided by 2 is 10, 10 squared is 100. And if we rewrite it as a perfect square, that becomes x plus 10 squared. And the last one, doesn't matter if it's decimals, you can still do this with fractions and decimals. If you take 15 and cut it in half, that's a 7.5. And if you take 7.5 and square it, I hope it's 56.25, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. But if you rewrite that as a perfect square, it's x minus 7.5 squared. So the goal of completing the square is so we can rewrite it to look like this. So hopefully you learned something today. We'll reinforce it a little bit in class on Tuesday. See you then. Bye.